"You stupid liar," the rich customer screamed as a glass shattered across the marble floor. "Girls like you always steal before they cry." The entire restaurant went silent. Naomi Kingston stood frozen beside table 12, her faded waitress uniform stained with water and wine. Her hands shook so badly the tray nearly slipped again. Expensive laughter filled the room. Phones lifted into the air. Someone was already recording. "I said I am sorry," Naomi whispered, her voice cracking. "Please. I did not steal anything." "Then where is my watch?" the woman snapped. Clarissa Kingston sat near the center of the luxury dining room in a white silk suit, diamonds glowing under the chandelier light. Calm. Cold. Powerful. She did not even look at Naomi like she was human. "Manager," Clarissa said softly, "remove her." The manager rushed forward immediately. "Naomi, just stop talking," he hissed. "You are embarrassing this restaurant." Naomi swallowed hard. Her old shoes were wet from spilled drinks. Her fingers clutched a tiny worn handbag with peeling leather edges. Inside it were hospital bills for Marcus Reed's mother. Medicine receipts. Coins. Nothing more. But nobody cared. "Please," Naomi begged quietly. "I need this job. My rent is already late." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before stealing," Clarissa replied. Sharp. Easy. Cruel. A few wealthy guests laughed under their breath. One woman covered her mouth while whispering, "She probably came here hungry." Another guest zoomed in with his phone camera. Naomi lowered her head in shame. Then a deep voice cut through the room. "She did not take anything." Everyone turned. Marcus Reed stood near the entrance in dusty construction clothes. Mud still covered his boots. Sweat darkened the collar of his faded shirt. He looked exhausted. Poor. Out of place among crystal glasses and black suits. But his eyes stayed fixed on Naomi. "I saw the watch under the table," Marcus said. Silence. The manager frowned. "Who are you?" "A customer," Marcus answered. "And she is telling the truth." A waiter bent down nervously. Seconds later, he lifted the missing watch from beneath the chair. The room shifted. Tiny whispers. Tiny shame. Naomi looked up slowly, tears sitting in her eyes. For 1 second, hope appeared. But Clarissa did not panic. She smiled. "Interesting," she said calmly. "Then perhaps she hid it there after being caught." The room turned cold again. The guests nodded immediately. Wealth was louder than truth. "Exactly," someone muttered. "These poor girls are smart." Naomi's breathing became uneven. "No," she whispered. "Please." "I swear, enough," the manager snapped. "You are fired." Naomi stared at him in shock. "Please do not do this," she begged. "My friend's mother needs medicine tonight. I cannot lose this job." Marcus stepped forward again. She already proved she was innocent. Clarissa slowly stood from her chair. The diamonds around her neck shimmered under the golden light. "Men like you always defend pretty crying women," she said. "That does not change what she is." Marcus clenched his jaw. "And what is she?" Clarissa looked directly at Naomi. "A nobody." Silence hit harder than screaming. Naomi's eyes filled instantly. She bent down quickly, trying to gather her small belongings while guests stared at her like entertainment. One folded hospital paper slipped from her bag onto the floor. Marcus noticed the red stamp from a public hospital. Overdue payment. Critical condition. Naomi grabbed it fast before anyone else could see. "Please," she whispered again. "Just let me finish tonight." "Get out," the manager said. 2 security guards started walking toward her. Naomi backed away immediately. The entire restaurant watched without helping. Marcus looked around in disbelief. Rich people eating expensive food. Soft piano music. Crystal chandeliers. And one crying waitress being destroyed in front of everyone. You are really throwing her away over a lie? Marcus asked. Clarissa picked up her purse. Poor people always call consequences cruelty. Naomi lowered her head. She could not even defend herself anymore. One guard grabbed her arm lightly. Another opened the front door. Rain poured outside. Heavy. Cold. Endless. Marcus stepped beside her. Do not touch her, he said quietly. The guards hesitated for a second. Clarissa narrowed her eyes at Marcus now. Really looking at him for the first time. Then Naomi accidentally dropped something else from her bag. A silver necklace slid across the marble floor. Old. Scratched. Hidden beneath her uniform the entire time. The moment Clarissa saw it, her expression changed. Tiny. Fast. But real. Fear. Edward Kingston, an older man sitting silently in the private dining section nearby, suddenly looked up from his wine glass. His face turned pale. He stared directly at the necklace. Then at Naomi. The room grew strangely quiet. Naomi quickly grabbed the necklace with trembling hands. Too late. Edward was already standing. Outside, thunder shook the windows. And at that exact moment, a black SUV slowly pulled up in front of the restaurant. The black SUV stopped in the rain. Every eye inside the restaurant turned toward the tinted windows. Edward Kingston stood completely still beside his table, staring at the silver necklace in Naomi's shaking hand like he had seen a ghost. Clarissa noticed it immediately. Fear flashed across her face again. Small. Fast. But real. Naomi quickly stepped backward toward the door. I should go, she whispered. Please. I do not want more trouble. Marcus looked at her soaked uniform and trembling hands. You should not walk alone in this rain, he said quietly. Clarissa snapped her fingers at the manager. Get them both out before they embarrass this place further. The guards moved again. Then Edward finally spoke. Calm. Deep. Dangerous. Wait. The entire room froze. Even Clarissa turned slowly toward him now. Edward walked closer to Naomi without taking his eyes off the necklace. The luxury restaurant suddenly felt smaller. Quieter. Where did you get that? He asked softly. Naomi grabbed the necklace tighter against her chest. It belonged to my mother. Your mother's name? Edward asked. What was it? Naomi hesitated instantly. Marcus noticed it. Fear. Real fear. I do not talk about her, Naomi whispered. Clarissa stepped in quickly. Edward, this girl is manipulating everyone here. I asked her a question, Edward replied coldly. Silence spread across the marble room. Naomi looked down at the floor. Her name was Evelyn, she finally said. Edward's expression changed. Tiny. But enough. Clarissa immediately interrupted. There are thousands of women named Evelyn. Marcus watched Edward carefully now. Something was wrong. The rich old man could not stop staring at Naomi's face. Especially her eyes. Especially the necklace. Thunder shook the windows again outside. The black SUV headlights cut through the rain. Naomi slowly backed toward the exit. I really need to leave, she whispered. Someone is waiting for me. Marcus frowned. Your family. Naomi lowered her eyes. No. Your mother's medicine. Marcus stood silent for a second. That small answer hit harder than tears. She had lost her job. Lost her dignity. Been humiliated in front of rich strangers. Yet she still remembered his sick mother. Edward noticed that too. You bought medicine for his mother, he asked quietly. Naomi nodded once. She needed help. Clarissa laughed softly. Very touching. Then her voice sharpened. But kindness does not erase lies. The guests nodded again immediately. Wealth always moved the room. Naomi swallowed hard. I never lied. Then why did you hide your necklace? Clarissa asked. Why were you so nervous when Mr. Kingston saw it? Naomi had no answer. Because she did not know herself. Marcus stepped closer beside her anyway. Not touching. Just standing there. Protection without power. Enough, he said. She already suffered enough tonight. Clarissa smiled coldly. And what exactly are you to her? Marcus looked at Naomi for 1 second. Her wet hair stuck against her face. Her mascara had faded from crying. Her old shoes were falling apart near the doorway. Someone who believes her, he answered. Silence again. Tiny. Heavy. Edward turned toward the manager. Pay her for tonight. Clarissa immediately cut in. Edward. One word. Sharp warning. He ignored her completely. And give her the camera footage from this evening, Edward added calmly. Clarissa's face tightened. Too fast to hide. Marcus noticed. Naomi noticed too. Tiny Hope entered the room for the first time. A waiter nervously whispered, maybe she really was telling the truth. Clarissa turned toward him instantly. Be careful what rumors you repeat. The waiter looked down immediately. Fear returned. Power returned. Naomi slowly shook her head. It does not matter anymore, she whispered. People already decided who I am. If you are listening right now, comment where you are watching from, and tell me honestly, do you believe Naomi is telling the truth? Edward stepped even closer now. Who gave you that necklace? He asked again. Naomi's breathing became uneven. My mother said, if anyone ever recognized it, she stopped herself. Clarissa spoke immediately. This is ridiculous. But Edward did not move. Recognized it for what? Naomi looked terrified now. Marcus could see she wanted to run. She said someone was supposed to come back for me one day. The room went completely silent. Even the rain outside felt quieter. Edward's hand trembled slightly beside his cane. Clarissa turned pale for half a second. Then her phone suddenly rang. She stepped aside quickly and answered in a low voice. Marcus only caught 3 words. The hospital file. Naomi looked exhausted now. Broken. Embarrassed. Hungry. Please, she whispered to Marcus. I just need to go home. Edward stared at her for another long moment. Then he asked softly, Naomi, what is your full name? Naomi froze completely. Marcus looked at her. Clarissa looked at her. The entire room waited. Naomi's lips parted slowly. Naomi, her voice shook. Naomi Evelyn Kingston. Edward stopped breathing. And across the room, Clarissa nearly dropped her phone. Edward Kingston stopped breathing. Clarissa slowly lowered her phone, but her face had already lost color. Marcus stared at Naomi beside the restaurant door while rainwater dripped from her faded sleeves onto the marble floor. Kingston. Edward repeated quietly. Naomi instantly looked ashamed after saying it aloud. It was my mother's last name, she whispered. I never used it before. Clarissa stepped forward fast. This girl is lying. Her voice cracked slightly now. Throw her out. But Edward raised one hand. Small movement. Total silence. The guards stopped immediately. Marcus noticed something strange then. Edward's eyes looked wet. Just for a second. Who gave you that name? Edward asked again. Naomi swallowed hard. My mother. Where is she now? Naomi looked away. County hospital. The room fell silent again. Marcus slowly looked at Naomi's trembling hands. Her fingernails were cracked from work. Her shoes were soaked through. Her purse barely closed because hospital bills were sticking out from inside. Clarissa folded her arms tightly. Edward, you are frightening guests over a homeless waitress. Naomi flinched at the word homeless. Marcus stepped closer beside her again. She is not homeless. Clarissa laughed coldly. Then why does she look like she sleeps in bus stations? Naomi lowered her head. No answer. Because sometimes she did. Edward looked at Marcus now. You know her? Marcus shook his head slowly. Only enough to know she helped my mother when nobody else did. That answer stayed in the room. Heavy. Real. Edward nodded once toward his assistant near the entrance. Find county hospital records for Evelyn Kingston. Clarissa reacted immediately. There is no reason for that. Edward looked at her calmly. I decide the reasons. Clarissa went quiet. But fear kept growing behind her eyes. Naomi suddenly stepped backward. Please stop, she whispered. I do not want trouble. Edward frowned slightly. You are already in trouble. Naomi shook her head fast. No. You do not understand. Marcus noticed tears forming again. Not dramatic tears. Exhausted tears. The kind people cry when life has already beaten them too many times. Edward studied her necklace again. Old silver. Worn edges. One tiny engraved symbol near the clasp. His hand tightened around his cane. Where did your mother get that necklace? Naomi hesitated too long. Clarissa noticed instantly. See? Another lie. Naomi finally whispered, she said it belonged to someone important. Edward's breathing changed slightly. Tiny. But Marcus noticed. A waiter accidentally dropped a glass somewhere behind them. The sound shattered the silence. Naomi suddenly pulled out an old hospital prescription from her purse. I really need to go now. My mother's medicine is overdue. Edward glanced at the paper. Stage 4 kidney failure. Unpaid balance stamped in red across the page. Marcus looked away for a second. The shame in Naomi's eyes hurt to watch. How long has she been sick? Marcus asked softly. 3 years. And you paid alone? Naomi nodded once. 2 jobs. Clarissa rolled her eyes. This performance is embarrassing. Edward turned toward her sharply now. Enough. That single word silenced the entire room again. Naomi looked stunned. Nobody had defended her all night. Not really. Edward turned back to Naomi. Where do you live? Naomi immediately stiffened. Fear again. Why? Answer the question. South Mercer Apartments. Clarissa froze again for half a second. Tiny reaction. But Edward saw it this time. Marcus saw it too. Interesting, Edward murmured quietly. Naomi looked confused. She did not understand why everyone suddenly cared where she lived. Outside, the rain became heavier. Thunder rolled across the city. Edward handed his assistant the prescription paper. Verify everything. The assistant nodded and hurried away. Tiny hope appeared inside Marcus for the first time tonight. Maybe Naomi would finally be believed. Then Clarissa's phone rang again. She walked several feet away and whispered harshly into it. Marcus only caught fragments. Do not let her mother talk, keep the file locked, Naomi heard enough to pale instantly. Her hands started shaking harder now. Marcus leaned closer. "What is wrong?" Naomi looked terrified. I think they know where my mother is." Edward's expression darkened. Clarissa quickly returned, forcing a smile again. "Edward, this is becoming absurd." Before anyone answered, Naomi's cracked phone suddenly buzzed in her purse. She grabbed it fast. The hospital number flashed across the screen. Her face drained completely after hearing the first sentence. "What do you mean she collapsed?" she whispered. The prescription paper slipped from her hands onto the marble floor. And when Edward bent down to pick it up, a faded photograph hidden behind the paper slid free beside his shoe. Edward stared at the picture in silence. Because the woman holding baby Naomi in that photo looked exactly like someone from the Kingston family mansion. Edward's fingers tightened around the faded photograph. Rain hammered against the restaurant windows while the entire lobby stood frozen. Naomi slowly looked up from her cracked phone after hearing the hospital nurse shouting through the speaker. "Your mother needs immediate treatment." Her voice broke apart. "Please come now." Edward kept staring at the picture. The woman holding baby Naomi smiled beside a black luxury car parked in front of the old Kingston mansion gates. One detail made his face lose color. The silver necklace around the woman's neck matched the one Naomi wore now. Exactly. Clarissa stepped forward too quickly. "That picture means nothing." Edward did not look at her. "Where did you get this photo?" Naomi wiped tears from her cheeks. "My mother kept it hidden." "Why?" "She said rich people destroyed our lives once already." Silence. Heavy silence. Marcus watched Edward carefully now. The billionaire looked shaken for the first time all night. Edward handed the photograph to his assistant. "Scan this immediately." Clarissa's voice sharpened. "Edward, you are embarrassing this family over some waitress." "Enough." Edward's tone turned cold. Even the guests stopped whispering. Naomi backed away slightly, frightened by all the attention now focused on her. "Please," she whispered. "I only need to get to my mother." Marcus stepped beside her again. Quiet protection. Small but real. Edward looked at Naomi carefully. "Your mother's full name." Naomi hesitated. Clarissa immediately interrupted. "This is ridiculous." Edward's eyes snapped toward her. "I did not ask you." Clarissa finally stepped back, but her hand shook near her purse. Edward turned back to Naomi. "Tell me." "Evelyn Kingston." The air changed. Several older guests suddenly exchanged nervous looks. Marcus frowned. He noticed one elderly woman quietly cover her mouth. Edward slowly sat down in a nearby chair as if the strength left his legs for a moment. "That is impossible," Clarissa whispered. But her face already showed fear instead of confidence. Edward motioned toward his assistant again. "Pull every archived record connected to Evelyn Kingston. Hospital files. Family records. Everything." "Yes, sir." Naomi looked confused now. "Why are you doing this?" Edward stared at the necklace again before answering quietly. "Because someone lied to you for a very long time." Emotional silence filled the room. Outside, lightning flashed across the city skyline. Marcus gently picked up Naomi's dropped prescription papers from the floor. The unpaid hospital balance sat on top in large red letters. "How much does the treatment cost?" he asked softly. Naomi looked ashamed. "Too much." Clarissa folded her arms tighter. "This girl is manipulating everyone." Marcus finally looked directly at her. "No. She is surviving." That sentence landed hard. Edward suddenly stood again. "Bring the car around." Naomi panicked instantly. "No. I cannot go anywhere with rich people. Her voice cracked badly now. Every time I trusted someone with money, my mother suffered. Edward stepped closer but stopped at a respectful distance. Miss Naomi, did your mother ever mention a man named Harold Kingston? Naomi froze completely. Her eyes widened. Tiny. But enough. How do you know that name? Edward did not answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened an old scanned family portrait. Marcus leaned slightly closer. The same woman from Naomi's faded photograph stood in the background beside Harold Kingston 30 years earlier. Naomi's breathing turned uneven. My mother used to cry when she said that name, she whispered. Clarissa suddenly grabbed Edward's arm hard. Stop this now. Edward slowly removed her hand. Why are you afraid? Clarissa's composure cracked for 1 second. I am not afraid. But Marcus noticed sweat forming near her temple. Edward looked toward the restaurant security cameras mounted above the entrance. Pull tonight's footage too, he ordered quietly. I want everything preserved. Tiny hope appeared in Naomi's eyes for the first time. Small. Fragile. Dangerous. Then the assistant returned holding a thin archive folder. Sir, we found one old hospital registration connected to Evelyn Kingston. Edward opened it immediately. Naomi leaned closer despite herself. Several pages were missing. Torn out. But one surviving page still remained inside. And at the top of the document, under Emergency Family Contact, was a name that made Edward slowly look up in disbelief. Harold Kingston. Father. Edward stared at the old hospital registration. Harold Kingston. Father. The name sat on the page like a buried bone finally pulled from the dirt. Naomi did not understand what it meant yet, but Clarissa did. Her face went cold first. Then her smile returned. Too smooth. Too fast. That page is incomplete, she said. A missing file cannot make a waitress family. Naomi flinched. Marcus turned toward Clarissa slowly. Why are you so afraid of a missing file? Clarissa ignored him and stepped closer to Edward. This is exactly how scams begin. A crying girl. A necklace. A sad hospital story. Naomi's eyes filled again. I never asked for anything. You walked into a Kingston restaurant wearing a Kingston necklace, Clarissa snapped. Do not pretend you are innocent. The guest started whispering again. Rich voices. Soft judgment. Phones lifted. Naomi looked at the floor, humiliated all over again. Marcus stepped in front of her. His construction shirt was still stained with dust. His boots still left mud on the polished marble. He looked poor beside their suits and diamonds, but he did not move. She was leaving when you stopped her, he said. Clarissa laughed. And now her poor hero speaks. The room chuckled nervously. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. Naomi whispered, Marcus, please. Your mother needs medicine. This is not your fight. He looked at her gently. You helped my mother when nobody saw you. That makes it my fight. For 1 second, Naomi almost believed someone would stand with her. Then Clarissa turned the room again. Manager, bring the staff statement. The manager appeared with shaking hands and placed a paper on the table. This says Naomi was seen near the guest's purse before the watch went missing. Naomi stared at him in shock. You know that is not true. He could not look at her. I am sorry. Clarissa smiled. There. A pattern. Theft. Lies. Fake family claims. Naomi's lips trembled. Please stop. No, Clarissa said coldly. You stop. Sign a statement that you lied tonight, and maybe I will convince the hospital not to remove your mother from care. The room went silent. Marcus's eyes darkened. Edward looked sharply at Clarissa. "What did you just say?" Clarissa recovered quickly. "I mean charity care." "Obviously. But the damage was done." Naomi looked terrified now. "You called the hospital?" Clarissa stepped closer, lowering her voice but making sure everyone heard. "Girls like you should learn when to disappear." Naomi clutched the necklace so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Marcus moved closer again, quiet and protective. "She is not signing anything." Clarissa looked him up and down. "And what will you do, construction boy? Build her a mansion with empty pockets?" Laughter broke out from a few tables. Marcus looked down for half a second. The insult landed. His rent was late. His mother's medicine was unpaid. His work boots had holes near the soles. But when he looked up again, his eyes were steady. "I may be poor," he said, "but I know cruelty when I see it." Edward watched him carefully. Something like respect crossed his face. Tiny hope entered the room again. Then Edward's assistant rushed back with a tablet. "Sir, the restaurant camera file from tonight has been altered." Clarissa's smile faded. "Altered by who?" Edward asked. The assistant hesitated. "The original file was overwritten from an administrative access point." Clarissa spoke fast. "The system fails all the time." Marcus pointed at the ceiling camera. "Then check the backup." The assistant looked nervous. "The backup is missing." Naomi closed her eyes. Another truth gone. Another powerful person winning. Clarissa smiled again, softer now. "See? Nothing proves she was innocent." Edward's face hardened. "Something proves someone is hiding evidence." Clarissa turned toward him sharply. "Do not ruin this family over a waitress." Naomi heard that word and broke a little more. Waitress. Nobody. Scam. Thief. Every label pressed into her skin like a bruise. Her phone buzzed again. Hospital. She answered with shaking hands. A nurse's voice came through. "Miss Kingston, your mother is asking for you. She keeps saying someone is coming for the necklace." Naomi froze. "Who?" The line crackled. She said. "Clarissa knows." Every face turned. Clarissa went perfectly still. Marcus heard it. Edward heard it. The whole room heard it. "That is enough," Clarissa snapped. "She is sick and confused." Naomi's tears fell freely now. "Why does my mother know your name?" Clarissa had no answer. "Not fast enough." Edward stepped closer to Naomi. "Give me the necklace for one moment." Naomi hesitated, then slowly placed it in his palm. Edward turned it under the chandelier light. A tiny hidden hinge opened near the clasp. Everyone leaned in. Inside was a small folded strip of paper, yellowed with age. Clarissa's face changed into pure panic. Edward opened it carefully. Only 3 words were written inside. "Protect my daughter." Beneath it was Harold Kingston's signature. The room fell completely silent. Then Clarissa suddenly whispered, too low and too scared, "That old fool should have burned everything." Marcus heard it. Edward heard it. And Naomi finally understood that Clarissa had known all along. Clarissa's face lost all warmth. That old fool should have burned everything. The sentence hung in the restaurant like smoke after a fire. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Naomi stared at her in shock, tears still running down her cheeks. Edward slowly folded the tiny paper from inside the necklace. His fingers trembled once before he hid it inside his coat pocket. Clarissa noticed immediately. Fear flashed across her face. "Edward," she said quickly, "you are misunderstanding everything." Edward looked at her calmly now. Too calmly. Then explain Harold Kingston's signature. Clarissa opened her mouth, but no answer came. Marcus looked between them carefully. The wealthy guests no longer looked amused. They looked nervous. Naomi whispered softly, "My mother was telling the truth." Her voice sounded small. Fragile. Edward turned toward her. "I do not know everything yet." Clarissa snapped immediately. "Because there is nothing to know." Edward ignored her and nodded toward his assistant. "Pull the original inheritance archives. And restore every deleted camera file from tonight." Clarissa's composure cracked again. "You cannot drag the family name through mud because of a necklace." "Then why are you shaking?" Marcus asked quietly. Silence. Sharp silence. Clarissa looked at Marcus with hatred now. "This does not concern construction workers." Marcus stepped closer anyway. "It concerns anyone tired of watching powerful people crush the weak." Several staff members lowered their eyes. Naomi looked overwhelmed. Too many eyes. Too many questions. Too much hope all at once. Her phone buzzed again. "Hospital." She answered immediately. "Miss Kingston," the nurse said urgently, "your mother keeps asking for a silver box hidden under the bed." Naomi froze. "What box?" "She said it belongs to Harold." Edward heard every word. So did Clarissa. Clarissa moved instantly toward the exit. Edward's voice stopped her cold. "Sit down." She slowly turned back. "You cannot order me around. Tonight I can." His tone chilled the entire room. Tiny hope flickered again inside Naomi's chest. Small. Dangerous. Edward looked toward his assistant. "Send someone to County Hospital now." Clarissa stepped forward fast. No, too fast. Too emotional. Everyone noticed. Edward's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why not?" Clarissa forced a laugh. "Because sick women say strange things." Marcus folded his arms. "Funny. You keep trying very hard to stop people from hearing her." Clarissa's jaw tightened. Naomi stood frozen beside the marble wall, clutching her worn purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She still looked poor. Exhausted. Small inside a world built for rich people. But now the room was starting to look at her differently. Not with pity anymore. With questions. Edward's assistant suddenly returned holding a tablet. "Sir, we recovered part of the deleted footage." The room fell silent again. Clarissa's breathing changed instantly. Edward took the tablet without a word. Grainy black and white video appeared on the screen. Naomi serving tables. Guests laughing. Clarissa walking toward the manager's office. Timestamp. 7 minutes before the accusation. Then another frame. Clarissa opening a guest's purse herself. Gasps spread quietly through the room. Naomi covered her mouth. Marcus stared in disbelief. Clarissa immediately grabbed for the tablet. "That video is edited." Edward pulled it away first. "Do not touch it." Another clip appeared. Clarissa speaking privately with the restaurant manager. No sound. But one moment froze the room completely. Clarissa slipping the missing diamond watch into Naomi's cleaning cart. Silence exploded across the marble floor. Nobody defended Clarissa now. Nobody laughed. Even the waiters looked horrified. Naomi's knees almost gave out. Marcus caught her arm gently before she fell. "I told you," Naomi whispered through tears. "I did not steal anything." Edward looked at her for a long moment. Regret filled his face now. Deep regret. Clarissa tried one last time. She manipulated all of this. "Enough," Edward said sharply. His voice cut through the room like glass. You framed her. Clarissa looked around desperately now, searching for support. None came. The wealthy guests lowered their eyes. Phones stopped recording. Tiny Justice entered the room for the first time. If you think this necklace hides something even bigger, comment now who you believe is truly afraid of the truth. But before Naomi could even breathe again, Edward's assistant spoke carefully. Sir, there is another problem. Edward turned. What? The assistant swallowed hard. The inheritance archive connected to Harold Kingston is incomplete. Clarissa's eyes flickered with panic again. Several pages are missing. Edward's face darkened. Missing or removed? No answer came. Then Naomi's phone buzzed one more time. Another hospital call. Her hands shook as she answered. The nurse sounded frightened now. Miss Kingston, someone came asking questions about your mother tonight. Naomi's blood ran cold. Who? Silence crackled through the line. Then the nurse whispered one sentence that made Edward slowly stand up from his chair. A woman named Clarissa said Evelyn Kingston must not speak to anyone again. The nurse's voice shook through Naomi's cracked phone. Miss Kingston. Clarissa just left the hospital. Naomi froze beside the restaurant wall. Marcus stood close enough to hear every word. Edward's eyes darkened instantly. Is your mother safe? He asked quietly. Naomi hesitated before answering. Nobody had asked her that in a very long time. I do not know. Edward took one slow breath. Then he removed his suit jacket and placed it gently around Naomi's shaking shoulders. The expensive fabric swallowed her faded waitress uniform immediately. The wealthy guests stared in silence. Clarissa looked furious. Edward, this is ridiculous. He did not even look at her. No one touches her tonight. The guards stopped moving instantly. Naomi looked overwhelmed. Her hands trembled under the heavy coat. You do not have to help me, she whispered. Edward's voice softened slightly. Maybe I should have listened sooner. That sentence changed the air between them. Small. Careful. Dangerous. Marcus watched quietly beside them, still holding Naomi's torn purse strap that had snapped during the humiliation. Clarissa stepped forward again. She is manipulating you. Naomi lowered her eyes immediately, almost expecting another insult. Another accusation. Another door closing. Instead, Edward asked one simple question. How long has your mother been in that hospital? Naomi blinked slowly. 7 months. Silence hit him harder than she expected. And you worked double shifts for her treatment? Naomi nodded once. I promised I would not let her die alone. Marcus looked away for a second, emotional. Even some restaurant workers lowered their heads in shame now. Clarissa crossed her arms tightly. Poor people always have sad stories. Edward finally turned toward her. His expression was calm. Too calm. And cruel people always hide behind money. Nobody spoke after that. Tiny hope entered Naomi's chest again, but she was terrified of it. Hope had betrayed her before. Edward's assistant stepped closer with the recovered footage tablet and the silver necklace. Edward carefully held the necklace in his palm now. He looked at the engraving again. H.K. and a faded date underneath. His eyes shifted toward Naomi slowly. Where did your mother get this? Naomi swallowed hard. She never told me everything. But? Edward asked softly. Naomi hesitated. Then finally whispered, she said it belonged to a man who promised to come back. Clarissa's face changed again. Fast. Sharp. Edward noticed immediately. So did Marcus. The rich guests began whispering again, quieter this time. Nervous whispers now. Naomi looked embarrassed by all the attention. She pulled the expensive jacket tighter around herself like she did not deserve it. Edward noticed that too. "You are cold," he said quietly. "I am fine," Naomi answered automatically. "No," Edward replied. "You are exhausted." The sentence almost broke her. Nobody had looked closely enough to notice before. Tears filled her eyes again, but she fought them back. Marcus suddenly spoke. "She has not eaten since morning." Edward looked shocked. Clarissa rolled her eyes immediately. "This is becoming theater." Edward ignored her completely. He motioned toward the restaurant manager. "Bring food." The manager hesitated, looking toward Clarissa first. Edward's voice hardened. "Now." For the first time tonight, someone obeyed without looking at Clarissa first. Naomi stared at the table silently when warm food finally arrived. Her hands shook too badly to lift the spoon properly. Edward noticed again. He looked away respectfully, pretending not to see her embarrassment. Tiny protection. Tiny dignity. Tiny kindness. Clarissa hated every second of it. "You are turning one waitress into a victim saint," she snapped. Naomi immediately lowered the spoon. "I do not want trouble." Edward answered before Clarissa could continue. Trouble already existed. Tonight simply exposed it. The room fell silent again. Then Naomi's phone buzzed once more. Hospital. Her face drained instantly. "Mama," she whispered after answering. Weak coughing came through the line. Then a tired woman's voice spoke slowly. "Naomi, do not trust the woman with the pearl earrings." Clarissa instinctively touched her earrings. Edward saw it immediately. Naomi looked confused. "Mama, what are you talking about?" Her mother kept coughing. The letter, inside the silver box, the call suddenly cut off. Naomi panicked. "Mama?" No answer. Edward stood instantly. "Prepare the car," he ordered his driver. Clarissa stepped forward fast. "You cannot take her anywhere." Edward's eyes locked onto hers coldly now. "Watch me." Naomi looked terrified again. "I cannot afford more problems." Edward looked at her for a long moment before speaking carefully. "Then let me help with one." The sentence hit her harder than expected. Not because of the money. Because somebody finally sounded sincere. But before Naomi could answer, Edward's assistant suddenly leaned close and whispered something in his ear. Edward's entire expression changed. "Are you certain?" The assistant nodded nervously. Edward slowly looked back at Naomi. Then at the silver necklace in his hand. "Sir?" Marcus asked carefully. Edward answered without taking his eyes off Naomi. "The handwriting inside this necklace." He paused. Clarissa's breathing stopped completely. Edward's voice lowered into stunned silence. "It matches my father's." Edward's fingers tightened around the silver necklace. The private hospital hallway suddenly felt too small for the silence growing between everyone. Naomi stood frozen beside him, still wrapped in his expensive coat, while Clarissa slowly stepped backward near the elevator doors. Edward looked at the engraving again. H.K. The same initials carved inside the old watch his father had carried until the day he died. "That handwriting," Edward whispered carefully. "My father used to write exactly like this." Naomi looked confused and exhausted. "I do not understand any of this." Clarissa answered too quickly. "Because there is nothing to understand." Edward's eyes shifted toward her instantly. Calm. Sharp. Dangerous now. "Then why are you shaking?" Clarissa crossed her arms tightly. "I am tired of this girl manipulating everyone." Before Edward could answer, Marcus approached with an old storage envelope the hospital receptionist had finally found after searching the archive room. Dust covered the edges. Naomi stared at it nervously. What is that? Marcus swallowed hard. Your mother's original admission file. Clarissa's face lost color for 1 second. Only 1 second. But Edward saw it. The hallway lights reflected against the polished floor while nurses quietly passed nearby pretending not to watch. Wealth and poverty stood side by side again. Edward in his tailored black suit. Naomi in worn shoes with trembling hands. The contrast almost hurt to look at. Edward opened the envelope carefully. Inside sat an old photograph folded between hospital papers. A younger woman stood beside Edward's father outside a small church. The woman held a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Half the photograph had been ripped away. Naomi stared at it silently. That is my mother, she whispered. Edward's breathing slowed instantly. Who tore the picture? Naomi shook her head. She never let me touch it. Clarissa stepped closer immediately. This proves nothing. Edward ignored her. He flipped through the hospital documents slowly until he stopped at one missing page. Torn out. His jaw tightened. Someone removed part of this file. Marcus leaned closer. Sir, look at the admission signature. Edward's eyes narrowed. The emergency contact line contained a name scratched out violently in black ink. But part of the last name remained visible. Kingston. Naomi looked pale now. Why would my mother hide this? Edward asked quietly, almost to himself. Or why would someone force her to? Silence hit again. Then Naomi suddenly remembered something. There was a box. Everyone looked at her. A silver box under my mother's bed. She never let anyone open it. Clarissa interrupted immediately. This is becoming ridiculous. Edward turned toward her slowly. You keep interrupting whenever the truth gets closer. Clarissa forced a laugh. You are building fairy tales from broken papers. But her voice cracked slightly at the end. Naomi noticed it too. A tiny crack in the perfect rich woman image. Tiny hope entered her chest again, though fear still drowned most of it. Edward looked back at Naomi carefully now. Did your mother ever mention my father? Naomi hesitated. Only once. What did she say? Naomi swallowed hard. She said a rich man promised to come back for her, but someone made sure he never did. The words hit Edward harder than he expected. He stepped away toward the hospital window quietly. Memories flashed through his mind now. His father arguing with Clarissa's mother years ago. A missing letter. A sudden trip overseas that never made sense. Tiny pieces moving together too fast. Behind them, Clarissa secretly pulled out her phone under her coat. Marcus noticed immediately. Who are you texting? Clarissa locked the screen fast. My lawyer. Edward turned around again. No one leaves this floor. His voice was colder now. Controlled authority. Naomi looked overwhelmed by everything happening around her. Please, she whispered softly. I only wanted to save my mother. Edward's eyes softened for a second. Maybe your mother was trying to save you too. That sentence nearly broke her. Tears filled her eyes again, but she stayed standing. Quiet dignity. Quiet pain. Then the hospital room door suddenly opened behind them. Naomi's mother weakly reached toward the hallway from her bed. Naomi, she whispered painfully. Naomi rushed toward her instantly. Edward followed slowly behind. Clarissa stayed near the door, watching carefully like someone cornered. Naomi's mother looked directly at Edward now. Fear filled her tired eyes immediately. You look exactly like him, she whispered. Edward stepped closer carefully. Like who? The older woman began trembling. The man who promised us a home. Clarissa suddenly shouted, Stop talking. Everyone turned toward her instantly. Too fast. Too emotional. Too guilty. Naomi stared at Clarissa in shock now. You knew. Clarissa's breathing became uneven. You do not understand what happened. Edward's voice lowered dangerously. Then explain it. But before Clarissa could answer, Naomi's mother grabbed Edward's wrist weakly and whispered something that froze him completely. The woman who destroyed our lives, still lives inside your mansion. Edward did not move for several seconds after Naomi's mother whispered those words. The mansion. Someone inside his own family. The idea settled into the room like cold smoke. Naomi stood beside the hospital bed trembling quietly while Clarissa slowly stepped backward toward the doorway. Her face remained composed, but her hands betrayed her now. She is confused, Clarissa said sharply. She is sick. Naomi's mother turned weakly toward her. You destroyed everything. Silence exploded through the room. Edward looked directly at Clarissa now. Calm. Controlled. But colder than before. What is she talking about? Clarissa forced a bitter laugh. You are really going to believe an old woman with fading memories over your own family? Edward answered quietly. I believe fear when I see it. Clarissa's eyes flickered for one dangerous second. Then she recovered immediately. Fine, she snapped. If you want truth so badly, bring everyone together tomorrow night at the Kingston estate. Let her tell her little story in front of the family. Naomi looked terrified instantly. No. I do not want more trouble. Clarissa turned toward her sharply. Or maybe you are afraid because your lies will fall apart. Edward stepped between them immediately. Enough. But Clarissa had already planted the trap. Public pressure. Family pressure. Rich people protecting rich people. Naomi could feel it already. The next evening, black luxury cars lined the massive circular driveway of the Kingston mansion. Wealth glowed from every window. Crystal chandeliers. Expensive suits. Cold smiles. Naomi stood near the entrance wearing the same modest dress beneath Edward's coat. She looked painfully out of place. Guests whispered the second they saw her. That is the waitress. The scam girl. She trapped Edward. Phones quietly lifted again. Naomi lowered her eyes immediately. Her mother remained at the hospital too weak to attend. Clarissa had made sure of that. Edward walked beside Naomi calmly, but distance still separated them. He could protect her presence. Not her pain. Yet. Inside the mansion ballroom, Clarissa controlled the room perfectly. She greeted relatives warmly. Laughed softly. Played victim beautifully. This poor girl became obsessed after Edward helped her, she told one aunt quietly enough for others to hear. Now she is dragging my family through humiliation. Naomi heard every word. Her hands trembled again. Marcus stood beside her protectively now. Do not let them break you, he whispered. But pressure closed from every side. A family lawyer approached Naomi with papers. Miss Naomi Carter, if you sign this statement confirming there was no relationship between your mother and the Kingston family, this situation can end peacefully. Naomi stared at the document silently. Clarissa stepped closer. Take the money and disappear. Naomi looked crushed. I never asked for money. Clarissa leaned closer. Poor people always say that before they ask for more. Edward watched from across the room now, studying every reaction carefully. Something still did not fit. The lawyer's timeline contradicted the hospital records. The missing file pages. The torn photograph. Tiny cracks everywhere. Naomi slowly pushed the papers away. I will not lie. Clarissa's smile vanished instantly. Then do not blame me for what happens next. Within minutes, another humiliation exploded. A servant suddenly rushed into the ballroom holding an open jewelry case. Miss Clarissa's diamond bracelet is missing. Guests gasped softly. Clarissa looked directly at Naomi. Too directly. Search her bag. Naomi froze completely. No, two guards stepped forward immediately. Marcus protested. This is insane. But the crowd already believed the story. Rich people always trusted rich people first. One guard opened Naomi's worn purse. Inside sat Clarissa's bracelet. The room erupted instantly. I knew it. She is a thief. She planned everything. Naomi looked horrified. I did not take that. Clarissa folded her arms coldly. Then explain why it was in your bag. Naomi tried to speak, but voices drowned her instantly. Phones lifted higher now. Some guests laughed quietly again. Edward's jaw tightened. He watched Naomi carefully instead of the bracelet. Her confusion looked real. Her pain looked real. Too real. Tiny hope appeared when Marcus suddenly whispered to Edward, "Sir, the clasp is broken." Edward narrowed his eyes. The bracelet clasp had fresh damage. Like it had been forced into the bag quickly. He looked toward Clarissa. She looked away first. Tiny crack. Tiny mistake. But before Edward could speak, the family lawyer interrupted loudly. Miss Naomi Carter should leave immediately before this situation becomes criminal. The crowd agreed instantly. Naomi's eyes filled with tears now. She looked completely cornered. I swear I did not steal anything. Nobody answered. Even worse, one elderly family member muttered loudly, her mother probably taught her this. The sentence nearly destroyed her. Naomi slowly reached into her purse again with shaking hands, desperate to grab the silver necklace for comfort. But her face suddenly changed. The necklace was gone. Her breathing stopped. Clarissa noticed immediately. A slow smile touched her lips. Looking for something? Naomi stared at her in horror now. Edward saw that look instantly. Fear. Recognition. Truth moving beneath the surface. Then suddenly the giant ballroom doors opened behind them. Every head turned. A black SUV convoy had arrived outside. Edward's assistant entered quickly carrying a sealed evidence envelope and a portable screen monitor. His voice echoed through the silent ballroom. Sir, we recovered the original security footage. The ballroom doors remained open as Edward's assistant carried the portable monitor into the center of the Kingston mansion. Every conversation died instantly. Crystal lights reflected across terrified faces now. Naomi stood near the edge of the room shaking quietly while Marcus moved protectively beside her. Clarissa remained perfectly still near the grand staircase, but her fingers tightened around the diamond bracelet she had planted herself. Edward walked slowly toward the center table and placed the sealed evidence envelope beside the untouched wine glasses. Quiet authority filled the room immediately. Nobody leaves, he said calmly. No one argued. The rich relatives exchanged nervous looks instead. The giant ballroom suddenly felt colder. Smaller. Dangerous. Naomi lowered her eyes when she noticed several guests staring at her again. Some still believed she was a liar. Some looked uncertain now. Others simply waited for entertainment. Clarissa recovered first. She lifted her chin elegantly and smiled toward the crowd. Edward is emotional right now. That girl manipulated a painful family memory. Naomi's face tightened instantly. Pain flashed across her eyes again. I never lied, she whispered. Clarissa laughed softly. Then prove it. Edward finally looked directly at Clarissa. That is exactly what we are doing tonight. Silence crashed through the ballroom again. Marcus connected the monitor while Edward's assistant carefully removed several documents from the envelope. Hospital files. Security reports. A damaged photograph sealed in plastic. Tiny pieces of truth sitting in front of powerful people. Naomi stared at the photograph nervously. Her mother's younger face looked back at her from the torn image beside Edward's father. The room began whispering louder now. That looks like Richard Kingston. Impossible. Why was this hidden? Clarissa stepped forward immediately. Old photographs mean nothing. Edward's voice stayed calm. Then why did someone remove pages from the hospital records? Clarissa froze for half a second. Tiny crack. Tiny fear. Naomi noticed it too now. For the first time, she looked at Clarissa not with fear, but suspicion. Tiny hope entered her chest carefully. Still fragile. Still dangerous. One elderly aunt suddenly pointed toward Naomi. She does have Richard's eyes. The room fell silent instantly. Naomi looked horrified by the attention. Edward looked away briefly, almost shaken by the same realization. But he controlled himself quickly. No assumptions tonight, he said firmly. Only facts. Clarissa folded her arms tightly. Facts. Fine. Show them. But her voice no longer sounded confident. Near the back of the room, one housemaid quietly entered carrying another envelope. Marcus intercepted her quickly. Where did this come from? The older woman looked terrified. Someone left it outside the kitchen in trance. Edward took the envelope carefully. No return name. Only one sentence written across the front. She was never supposed to return. Naomi's breathing slowed instantly. Clarissa looked pale now. Real fear finally touched her face. Edward opened the envelope slowly but stopped before removing the contents. Not yet, he said quietly. The tension inside the ballroom tightened again. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed properly anymore. Even the waiters stood frozen beside silver trays. The wealthy guests who once laughed at Naomi now watched her like she carried a secret capable of destroying the entire Kingston family. Naomi whispered softly toward Edward, I do not belong here. Edward answered without looking away from the evidence. Maybe someone spent years making sure you believed that. The sentence nearly broke her again. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Then the portable screen flickered alive. Static flashed briefly across the monitor. The recovered security footage was ready. Clarissa immediately stepped forward. This is insane. Edward finally raised his voice slightly for the first time all night. Enough. The room froze. You accused her publicly, he continued calmly. Tonight the truth will speak publicly too. A nervous family lawyer interrupted quickly. Edward, perhaps this should happen privately. Edward slowly turned toward him. Private silence created this disaster. Nobody argued after that. Around the ballroom, whispers began changing direction now. Not against Naomi anymore. Against Clarissa. Against the missing records. Against the lies nobody wanted to question before. If you are watching this story right now, comment below who you believe deserves justice here. And tell us honestly, what do you think Clarissa is still hiding? The tension only deepened when Naomi suddenly noticed something inside the open envelope on the table. Her silver necklace. Clarissa saw it too. Her face lost color immediately. Edward slowly lifted the necklace into the light. This was hidden with the final document, he said quietly. Why? Nobody answered. The room felt suffocating now. One trembling housemaid suddenly stepped forward from the back of the ballroom. Sir, she whispered shakily. I remember that necklace. Clarissa snapped instantly. Be quiet. The woman flinched hard. Edward's eyes darkened. Let her speak. The older maid began shaking violently now. I saw Miss Clarissa take it from the crying woman years ago, gasps exploded through the ballroom. Clarissa immediately pointed toward Naomi. She paid her to say that. But her voice cracked badly now. Edward slowly picked up the remote control for the monitor. Before any of you judge her again, he looked directly at Naomi. Then at Clarissa. Then toward the frozen crowd. Watch this. The security footage began loading onto the giant ballroom screen as Clarissa's face slowly drained of all color. The ballroom screen flickered once before the recovered security footage finally appeared. Every eye locked onto it immediately. Naomi stopped breathing. Clarissa slowly stepped backward without realizing it. Edward stood beside the monitor with one hand gripping the silver necklace tightly. The footage showed the mansion hallway from years earlier. Grainy. Silent. But clear enough. A younger woman appeared on the screen carrying a crying child wrapped in a faded yellow blanket. Gasps spread across the ballroom instantly because everyone recognized the woman. Naomi's mother. Then the second figure entered the frame. Clarissa. The room fell completely silent now. No music. No whispers. Only the sound of nervous breathing. Clarissa immediately pointed toward the screen. This proves nothing. Edward did not even look at her. Keep watching. The footage continued. Naomi's mother held out the silver necklace desperately while speaking through tears. Clarissa snatched it from her hand violently. Then she pointed toward the mansion gate. Seconds later, security guards appeared and forced the crying woman outside into the rain while she begged to come back. Naomi's knees weakened instantly. Marcus stepped closer quietly in case she collapsed. The ballroom guests stared in horror now. Phones slowly lowered. Nobody smiled anymore. One elderly guest whispered shakily, she was thrown out. Clarissa raised her voice immediately. That woman was dangerous. But before she could continue, Edward's assistant opened the final hospital file. Sir, he said carefully. The birth record was altered. Another wave of silence crashed through the ballroom. Edward slowly took the document and held it up for everyone to see. Original patient name, he read calmly. Angela Brooks. Naomi's mother. Naomi covered her mouth instantly. Tears filled her eyes. Edward continued reading. Child delivered under Kingston family medical coverage. Several wealthy relatives stood up immediately in shock. Impossible. Richard never mentioned this. Why was this hidden? Clarissa's face lost all color now. She tried to interrupt again. Richard was helping charity cases. Then Marcus placed another photograph beside Naomi's face. The room froze again. The same eyes. The same smile. The same birthmark near the left shoulder barely visible in the old family picture. Edward looked directly at Naomi now. His voice softened for the first time all night. Your real name is Naomi Kingston. The ballroom erupted into gasps. Naomi looked completely shattered. No, she whispered weakly. That cannot be true. But the elderly housemaid stepped forward trembling again. Your mother worked here many years ago, she said through tears. Mr. Richard loved both of you. But after his accident, everything changed. Clarissa suddenly screamed, she is lying. The crowd flinched hard at the panic in her voice. Edward finally turned toward Clarissa fully now. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. Then explain the altered records. Clarissa stayed silent. Explain the missing pages. Still silence. Explain why you hid this necklace for 20 years. Clarissa's lips trembled badly now. Naomi stood frozen while the world around her collapsed and rebuilt itself at the same time. Every insult. Every humiliation. Every closed door. Suddenly they all carried a different meaning now. One young boy near the back whispered innocently, that means she belongs here, nobody corrected him. The silence itself became the answer. Then the final evidence arrived. Marcus connected audio recovered from the damaged hallway camera. Static filled the ballroom briefly before a woman's frightened voice echoed across the speakers. Angela Brooks. Please. Richard promised to protect my daughter. Several guests covered their mouths instantly. Naomi broke into tears quietly. Then another voice entered the recording. Clarissa. Cold. Sharp. Cruel. That child will never carry the Kingston name. Absolute silence swallowed the mansion. Clarissa staggered backward slowly as every face turned toward her now. No more whispers. No more confusion. Only judgment. Edward's jaw tightened slightly. You knew the truth from the beginning, he said quietly. Clarissa looked around desperately for support, but even her closest relatives avoided her eyes now. Naomi trembled violently while staring at the woman who destroyed her mother's life. The old housemaid stepped closer and handed Edward one final sealed letter. Mr. Richard gave me this before he died, she whispered. Edward opened it carefully. His expression changed instantly. Sharp. Heavy. Dangerous. He slowly looked back at Naomi with stunned disbelief. Then he turned toward Clarissa one final time. Why, he asked quietly, did my father leave half of the Kingston inheritance to Naomi and her mother? The entire ballroom stared at Clarissa as her face collapsed in complete panic. Clarissa's hands shook violently as the sealed letter slipped from Edward's fingers onto the marble floor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire ballroom stared at her now like they were seeing her for the first time. Not as the elegant woman who controlled the Kingston mansion for 20 years. But as someone cornered by the truth she buried alive. Clarissa forced herself to laugh weakly. Richard was sick, she said quickly. He did not know what he was writing. Edward slowly picked up the letter again. Calm. Cold. Controlled. My father signed every page, he replied. And his lawyer confirmed it tonight. A sharp breath escaped from several guests immediately. Clarissa looked toward the family members desperately, but even her closest allies avoided her eyes now. Naomi stood frozen beside Marcus, tears still falling silently down her face. Her entire life suddenly made terrible sense now. The poverty. The rejection. The years her mother suffered in silence. One elderly woman from the Kingston family lowered her head slowly. We blamed the wrong people, she whispered painfully. Clarissa snapped instantly. Do not pity her. But nobody listened anymore. Edward stepped forward and placed the silver necklace carefully into Naomi's trembling hands. This belonged to your mother, he said softly. My father bought it the day you were born. Naomi broke down completely now. She held the necklace against her chest while trying to breathe through the pain. Marcus quietly stood beside her without speaking. Then Edward faced the crowd fully. Naomi Brooks was denied her rightful identity, he announced clearly. Her mother was removed from this family through lies. Complete silence filled the ballroom again. One guest slowly lowered his phone. Another looked ashamed for recording Naomi earlier that night. Clarissa suddenly pointed toward Naomi with desperation burning in her eyes. She came here for money. Naomi finally lifted her head. Her voice was weak but steady. If I wanted money, she whispered, I would not have spent my life cleaning tables to pay hospital bills. The room shattered into uncomfortable silence again. Even the servants near the wall looked emotional now. Edward turned toward Clarissa one final time. You altered medical records. No, you hid inheritance documents. That is not true. You forced Angela and her child into poverty. Clarissa opened her mouth again, but this time the old housemaid interrupted her directly. I saw everything. Gasps spread instantly. The old woman stepped forward with tears in her eyes. Angela begged to stay. She begged for milk for the baby. But Clarissa threw her into the rain. Clarissa's knees nearly gave out. One wealthy family member stood abruptly. "You lied to all of us." Another spoke through clenched teeth. "Richard died believing his daughter was gone." Clarissa looked around helplessly now. Her power was collapsing in front of everyone. Edward handed the recovered files directly to the family lawyer. "Effective immediately," he said calmly, "Clarissa Kingston is removed from all estate authority pending full legal review." Shock exploded across the ballroom. Clarissa stumbled backward. "You cannot do this to me." Edward's expression never changed. "You already did it to yourself." Nobody defended her. Nobody moved toward her. The silence became her punishment. Then Edward looked toward Naomi again. Softer now. Human. "Your mother's medical debt will be paid tonight." Naomi covered her mouth instantly as tears poured harder now. Marcus quietly looked away, emotional himself. Edward continued carefully. "And the Kingston family will publicly restore your name." Naomi could barely stand. The same crowd that mocked her hours earlier now watched her with shame and disbelief. One young waitress near the back began crying quietly. Another servant whispered, "Justice finally came." Clarissa made one final desperate attempt to speak. "Naomi, please," but Naomi did not scream. She did not insult her. She simply looked at the woman calmly through tears. "My mother begged you for kindness," she said softly. "You gave her fear instead." Clarissa lowered her head completely. Defeated. Broken by the truth itself. Edward then opened the final inheritance folder slowly before Naomi. Inside were official documents bearing her real family name. Naomi Kingston. Her hands trembled as she touched the papers carefully. Years of pain. Years of humiliation. Years of believing she was unwanted. All collapsing at once. Edward gently closed the folder again before the crowd could stare longer. "No more public humiliation tonight," he said firmly. "She has suffered enough." Then he extended his hand toward Naomi quietly. The ballroom watched in silence as the massive mansion doors slowly opened behind him. Warm light spilled across the marble floor. Somewhere outside, the rain had finally stopped. Naomi looked toward the open doors, then toward the inheritance papers shaking in her hands. Her entire life stood on the other side of that doorway now. Edward's voice softened almost to a whisper. "Come home, Naomi." Naomi stood frozen at the entrance of the Kingston mansion while the massive doors remained open before her. Warm golden light spilled across the marble floor. For a moment, she could not move. Her fingers still trembled around the inheritance papers carrying her real name. Naomi Kingston. The name felt strange in her hands. Heavy. Painful. Beautiful. Edward waited quietly beside her. No pressure. No pride. Just calm patience. "You do not have to decide tonight," he said softly. Naomi looked up slowly. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but for the first time all evening, fear was no longer the only thing inside them. Behind Edward, several household staff members lowered their heads respectfully toward her. Not with pity. With recognition. Naomi swallowed hard. All her life, people looked through her like she did not belong anywhere. But now the same mansion that once rejected her stood open in silence, waiting for her to enter. Marcus stepped closer carefully. "Your mother is asking for you," he whispered gently. Naomi's breath caught instantly. She hurried toward the upstairs guest room where doctors were now caring for Angela Brooks properly for the first time in years. Clean sheets. Warm lights. Medicine already prepared. Angela looked weak in the bed, but peaceful. When Naomi entered the room, her mother slowly smiled through tears. "You came back," Angela whispered. Naomi collapsed beside the bed immediately, holding her mother's hands tightly. "I thought I lost everything," Naomi cried softly. Angela touched her daughter's face gently. "No," she whispered. "You finally found what was stolen from you." Silence filled the room warmly. "Safe now. Human." Edward quietly placed the silver necklace on the bedside table beside an old faded photograph of Angela holding baby Naomi years ago. The same necklace that once symbolized rejection now became proof that the truth survived. Marcus smiled faintly. "Mr. Kingston already arranged your mother's treatment." Naomi looked toward Edward in shock. Edward simply nodded once. "Your family suffered enough." Tears returned to Naomi's eyes again, but these tears felt different now. Not humiliation. Relief. Outside the mansion, news about Clarissa spread quickly. She lost control of the estate completely. Family members refused to defend her publicly. The same wealthy guests who once laughed at Naomi now spoke about her with shame. One woman from the gala quietly approached Naomi the next morning carrying folded uniforms from the restaurant. "I am sorry," she whispered painfully. Naomi accepted the apology quietly. No anger. No revenge. Just exhaustion finally beginning to heal. Days later, the mansion felt less cold. Doctors came regularly for Angela. Naomi no longer counted coins for medicine. Fresh flowers appeared in her room every morning. Marcus helped her understand the inheritance documents slowly, carefully, without overwhelming her. Edward remained calm and respectful through it all. Never forcing closeness. Never treating her like charity. One evening, Naomi stood alone in the mansion library staring at an old family portrait. Edward approached quietly beside her. "My father searched for you before he died," he admitted softly. Naomi lowered her eyes. "Then why did life become so cruel?" Edward looked toward the portrait silently for a moment. "Because powerful people lied," he answered. "And good people stayed silent too long." Naomi nodded slowly. Then she surprised herself by smiling faintly for the first time. Small. Fragile. Real. A few days later, Angela became strong enough to walk into the mansion garden beside her daughter. Sunlight touched their faces softly while the wind moved through the trees. The old housemaid watched from nearby with tears in her eyes. "Your father promised this house would always protect you," she whispered to Naomi. Today that promise finally returned. Naomi gently touched the silver necklace around her neck again. No longer a hidden secret. No longer a wound. Now it was proof that her mother's suffering mattered. That truth mattered. That dignity could return even after years of pain. At the front gates of the mansion, workers unloaded construction tools for a new community shelter funded by the Kingston family in Angela's name. Marcus smiled proudly watching Naomi notice it. Edward wanted something good to come from all this. Naomi looked toward Edward standing quietly across the courtyard. Their eyes met for a long moment. No grand romance. No dramatic confession. Just respect. Safety. A future that no longer felt impossible. Somewhere nearby, a little servant boy laughed while running through the garden. "Miss Naomi," he called happily. Naomi turned toward him instinctively. Then she froze slightly at the sound of the title. Miss Naomi. Not waitress. Not liar. Not outsider. Finally seen for who she truly was. She looked back once toward the mansion doors where she had once stood shaking in humiliation. Then she slowly walked forward beside her mother, beside the people who finally chose truth over status. And for the first time in many years, Naomi did not feel afraid of tomorrow. Because people may mock the poor. They may hide the truth. They may use power to destroy innocent lives. But truth cannot stay buried forever. The cruel eventually face their own shame. And kindness, even delayed, always finds its way home.